Disturbing new emails pulled from Epstein's hidden safes are allegedly exposing a wild secret that Epstein supposedly got Princess Eugenie pregnant, and the palace kept it quiet.
Someone finally said out loud what the internet had been quietly speculating about for weeks. The moment those words were spoken on camera, everything changed. Comment sections erupted instantly. Royal watchers were stunned, and conversations spread across every platform. Suddenly, a story the palace had managed to keep buried for more than a decade resurfaced and demanded attention.
Sarah Ferguson congratulated Jeffrey Epstein on the birth of a baby boy.
A baby boy. Congratulations. Those words reportedly came from someone within the royal inner circle to a convicted sex offender shortly after he left prison. Pause for a moment and really absorb that. Think about what it implies and why it has made so many people uncomfortable.
A young woman claimed she gave birth to Epstein's child, and that baby was taken from her just minutes after birth.
The photo was reportedly taken just minutes after birth. Now, ask yourself a difficult question. If something like that could happen to one woman, what might have happened to others? And why, after all these years, are people suggesting that Princess Eugenie may finally be ready to speak? Yet there is another detail many people are overlooking: the emails, the timing, the visits, and the long silence surrounding them. Recently, a source close to Eugenie claimed she has quietly been confiding in trusted people about what really occurred. And if those claims are true, the reality is far different from what most people expected. To understand it, we need to go back to the beginning, not to headlines or viral clips, but to the actual timeline. When the events are placed together piece by piece, what once appeared to be poor judgment begins to look far more deliberate. It all traces back to when Jeffrey Epstein was convicted in 2008.
Jeffrey Epstein went to jail just before 10 this morning. He pleaded guilty in open court. He agreed to serve a total of 18 months in a Palm Beach detention facility, 12 for felony solicitation of prostitutes, and an additional 6 for procuring persons under 18.
At that point, Jeffrey Epstein was not simply surrounded by rumors. He had already been legally convicted. The case was on record, a guilty plea entered in open court. Yet only 5 days after he was released from detention, reports claim Sarah Ferguson brought both of her daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, to visit him. Eugenie was still young at the time. The decision to go there was not hers alone. It was arranged by her mother. That detail matters because it suggests that whatever environment Eugenie entered, she did so under the direction of the very people meant to protect her. Those individuals had already decided maintaining a relationship with Epstein was worthwhile. The obvious question is why. Many observers believe the financial connections offer the answer faster than anyone within the palace would care to acknowledge.
One email from Sarah asks Epstein for £20,000 to pay her rent because the landlord is threatening to go public with what she owes. We learned that when Sarah visited New York, Epstein had to provide her with 4 apartments.
4 apartments, £20,000. And that figure only represents what appeared in documented records. At the time, Sarah Ferguson was reportedly struggling with significant debt. She maintained a high-profile lifestyle, but lacked the income to sustain it. Epstein, despite having just served time for crimes involving minors, was allegedly acting as a financial lifeline. For many people, the story usually stops there. They conclude that Ferguson made extremely poor decisions, borrowing money from the wrong person. Embarrassing, certainly, but not necessarily criminal. However, according to some sources, the situation may go much deeper than that. Individuals close to Eugenie have suggested that what occurred during those visits, and in the months afterward, left a lasting impact she carried silently for years. Recently, and very cautiously, she has reportedly begun sharing pieces of that experience. Not publicly and not with journalists, but with people she trusts. Some of those individuals have since begun speaking. Before continuing, it is important to separate confirmed facts from allegations. This story deserves that clarity. What is known? Eugenie spent time in locations connected to Epstein during a period when he had already been convicted. What is documented? Her mother maintained financial connections with him that included emails, loan requests, and housing arrangements. What is also confirmed? An email dated September 21st, 2011, in which someone from within the royal circle congratulated Epstein on the birth of a baby boy.
What have we learnt this morning?
Well, we've learnt by way of these emails that Jeffrey Epstein had a child 15 years ago, a baby boy.
She's made some huge mistakes. Having anything to do with Epstein was a total wrong decision in every sense of the word.
There was also a phrase often associated with Epstein, very keen to have children. When considered in the broader context of allegations surrounding him, that statement becomes deeply unsettling. The suggestion was not that he wanted a typical family life. Testimonies and documents from victims have pointed towards something far more disturbing, claims that he had an intentional, almost clinical interest in producing offspring. According to references in newly released documents, Epstein allegedly spoke about creating what he described as a superior gene pool. He reportedly wanted children in a very deliberate way, and allegations suggest consent was not always part of the equation. Sources claim that Eugenie has privately told close confidants she became pregnant during the period when her mother was financially connected to Epstein. She has never stated this publicly and has not confirmed it in any interview. However, several people who have interacted with her over the past 2 years claim she has discussed it privately, carefully and quietly, and what she described was deeply painful. The allegation, which remains unverified, is that she felt pressured, that the pregnancy did not continue, and that she was made to understand clearly that the palace's priority was not her well-being, but controlling the narrative. For those who think that scenario sounds too extreme, they point to the broader pattern already surrounding Epstein.
A young woman claimed she gave birth to Epstein's child, and that baby was taken from her just minutes after birth.
Many observers argue this situation was never about a single woman. By numerous accounts, it appeared to be part of a larger system. Systems like that do not operate by accident. They continue because powerful individuals allow them to. In Epstein's world, some of those powerful figures were connected to royalty. The British royal family historically handles scandals in a very particular way. Rather than issuing direct denials, they often respond with silence, redirection, and patience, allowing time to dull public attention. Interestingly, while Prince Andrew's name has been associated with lawsuits, settlements, and years of public controversy, Princess Eugenie's name has remained largely absent from official discussions. It appears only in speculation, online debates, and the gaps between formal statements. The palace has never been required to publicly address her connection to any of these events.
Why?
Opinions differ. Some believe it is because she may have been a victim and the institution wishes to shield her. Others argue that what she knows could be so damaging that keeping her quiet has been a priority.
It's about why the royal family kept standing by a man who had already been convicted.
That question has never had a satisfying answer. The idea that people simply didn't know better becomes difficult to accept when the timeline is examined. Epstein had already been convicted. The visit reportedly occurred 5 days after his release. Communication continued afterward. Financial ties remained active. Yet no one publicly drew a firm line. If Eugenie was indeed a victim, as some sources suggest, it adds an entirely different dimension. It would mean the institution expected to protect her was the same one that placed her in that environment. Her mother reportedly accepted money from the man. Her father was photographed with individuals later identified as Epstein's victims. And the royal establishment itself allegedly encouraged silence. At that point, it would no longer be just a scandal. It would resemble a cover-up layered on top of another cover-up. In recent years, observers have noticed subtle shifts in Eugenie's public life. She stepped back from certain royal responsibilities, relocated, and appeared more selective with public appearances. According to insiders, she has also begun having conversations that sound less like someone protecting a family narrative and more like someone gradually preparing to tell the truth.
He's made some huge mistakes. Having anything to do with Epstein was a total wrong decision in every sense of the word.
That sentiment was originally said about her mother, but people close to Eugenie believe she has begun applying that same reflection to her own past. Unlike Ferguson, they say she is not attempting to deflect responsibility or dismiss the subject. Instead, she appears to be processing it slowly and allowing trusted individuals to understand what she experienced. Now, let's return to the central thread, the baby. Because when this detail is examined closely, many other pieces begin to unravel. The email dated September 21st, 2011 included a congratulatory message about a baby boy. It reportedly said the news came from the Duke, which many believe refers to Prince Andrew.
Yes, a baby boy. Now, just stop for a second. Epstein was never publicly known to have children. His will did not name any child. Yet here is someone close to the royal circle congratulating him on becoming a father.
Yet Epstein's will mention no children. There is no official record, no public acknowledgement, nothing that identifies any offspring. For a man whose wealth was estimated in the hundreds of millions, not a single dollar was legally allocated to a child. That raises an obvious question. If no child existed, the email becomes difficult to explain. But if a child did exist and was deliberately kept out of official records, that introduces a much darker possibility. When this is compared with claims that Eugenie privately discussed a pregnancy that was handled discreetly, possibly without her full consent, and in a manner prioritizing the palace's interests rather than her own, a troubling picture begins to emerge. Again, accuracy matters. These remain allegations reported by sources. None of it has been publicly confirmed by Eugenie herself. What is confirmed, however, is that during the 2020 Epstein investigation, more than 100 people contacted DNA testing companies believing they might potentially be his biological children.
If more than 100 people later reached out to DNA companies thinking they could be his child, something that came up during the 2020 DNA investigation talks, then the question feels unavoidable. Did Epstein secretly father children?
That number alone is astonishing. Over 100 individuals believed they had enough reason, whether memories, experiences, or documentation, to suspect they might share DNA with Jeffrey Epstein. This was not internet speculation. It occurred during a real federal investigation. If Epstein truly intended what his alleged writing suggested, creating a superior gene pool, then identifying those potential children becomes a central question. Where are they now? Who ensured their identities remained hidden? For some observers, the significance of Eugenie's position becomes clear here. She was part of a family that had both financial and social ties to Epstein during extremely formative years of her life. If she experienced something directly, she may hold one of the most personal perspectives on the entire situation. The next question many people ask is simple. How could a secret of this scale remain hidden for so long?
Epstein reportedly had high-end HD camera systems set up across his island properties. If the footage was backed up off-site, then copies could have existed somewhere beyond the island. So if powerful guests visited, where is that footage now? And if there were recordings, who controlled them?
The answer, according to many analysts, lies in three factors: money, access, and leverage. Epstein was not just building relationships with influential figures. He was reportedly collecting information about them. In circles like those, information functions as currency. It provides protection, bargaining power, and control. If someone within elite circles had something to conceal, a visit, a relationship, or even a pregnancy, and Epstein possessed proof of it, that person would not simply be an acquaintance. They could become someone effectively trapped, unable to speak without risking immense consequences. Some observers believe this possibility explains the royal family's unusual response pattern. Not only the silence itself, but the speed with which that silence appeared. The consistency of the responses from everyone in the circle was striking. That kind of coordinated quiet rarely happens spontaneously. More often, it emerges when individuals have been reminded, discreetly but firmly, of what might happen if they speak openly.
7 charities reportedly cut ties with Sarah Ferguson after news broke that she had been in email contact with Epstein.
Fergie has been dropped by several charities, as you're just saying there, completely removed from many.
Sarah Ferguson already experienced the consequences of scandal. She lost charitable roles, public positions, and much of the goodwill she had spent years rebuilding after earlier controversies. Emails revealing financial ties to Epstein erased much of that progress. Now imagine what Eugenie may have been carrying privately. Not financial documents or embarrassing messages, but personal experiences, events that affected her own body and life story. All of it existing within a family that has repeatedly demonstrated how it handles secrets that threaten its reputation. Historically, the priority has rarely been protecting individuals. The priority has been protecting the institution. At the present moment, new Epstein-related documents continue to emerge. Each release introduces additional names, connections, and communications. The palace, as usual, maintains its composed silence, acting as though the controversy sits far from its walls. However, sources claim Eugenie herself may no longer be in the same place emotionally that she was a few years ago. Those around her describe someone who has spent significant time reflecting, someone who has had private conversations that felt almost exploratory, testing what it might mean to eventually speak openly. Not necessarily through a dramatic press conference or documentary, but perhaps through something smaller, a signal or acknowledgement that what happened was real and unjust.
Because if powerful families really had secret children hidden away, that wouldn't just be a scandal, it would change history as we know it.
If such a revelation were ever confirmed, its impact could be enormous. Consider the implications. If a member of the British royal family had been pregnant by Jeffrey Epstein, and that situation was quietly managed or concealed by palace authorities, and if a child existed without official record, that would go far beyond a tabloid headline. It could trigger a constitutional crisis. Truths of that magnitude do not merely damage reputations, they can shake entire institutions. They force the public to reconsider the narrative surrounding one of the most recognizable families in the world. Perhaps that possibility explains the remarkable level of silence that has surrounded the subject for so long. Some secrets are not hidden simply because they're embarrassing. They are hidden because revealing them could threaten the survival of powerful structures. The real question now is not whether Eugenie knows something. The question is whether the world is ready to hear it, and whether those who have controlled this narrative for more than a decade still possess enough influence to prevent it from emerging. With every new email release and every additional document, that influence appears to weaken slightly. The walls around the story grow thinner, and more individuals connected to Eugenie's circle are reportedly beginning to speak.
If there's really nothing to hide, why does every new document drop only raise more questions instead of clearing things up? And if this story still isn't done, what do you think the next set of files might uncover?
Which brings us to the simplest question of all. If nothing significant happened, why not clarify the record? Open the files, address the timeline, explain the email, answer the questions that millions of people are already asking. At the moment, the silence itself is fueling speculation. To many observers, it no longer feels like protection. It feels like confirmation that something remains unresolved. If Eugenie truly is preparing to speak, as some sources claim, this story may soon move into territory few people expected. And when that moment arrives, those who have been following the details closely will understand how the pieces fit together.